Last week, the Minnesota House of Representatives passed a voter ID amendment, which you and I will most likely be voting on in the November election. This week, the Minnesota Senate's expected to take it up. Now, since both the House and Senate are owned by Republicans right now in the state of Minnesota, I'm pretty sure that we're going to be voting on this in November. Now, this constitutional amendment would be the second constitutional amendment we're going to be voting on, the other one being the gay marriage amendment. But let's really look at what we're doing here with the voting ID amendment. This was passed, at least in the House, on nothing but party lines. All Republicans supported voter ID. All Democrats in the House opposed voter ID. But why? 30 states in the Union make you show some form of voter ID before you cast your ballot. So let's examine the arguments quick as to why they think this is such a bad measure on the Democratic side, and the Republican side seems to be pushing it so heavily. There are a lot of different polls out there taken on this issue. The number that I hear quoted the most is 78% of those polled said they would support voter ID. Again, I've seen a variety of polls. However, not a single poll has ever put that threshold below 50%. You need an ID to get a library card, to apply for any kind of government benefits, for Pete's sake, to be able to cash a check, go to the bank, see a certain movie, go have a beer at the bar. There are a number of reasons you need an ID. Maybe casting one for a ballot that ensures how our democratic process goes isn't too big of a deal, especially since over half the states in the Union already require one of these types of identifications. It's not going to cost anybody anything. You and I as taxpayers will have to pay for this program however much it would cost, because you cannot charge people to vote. That's a poll tax. So those that do not have IDs will have to get them in some way. But the Democrats' argument that somehow a whole series of elderly people or young college people don't have access to an ID or don't have some kind of ID, I think is a little bit of an overstatement. There may be some. However, I do know some people that live in nursing homes. There are elderly citizens themselves still living at home. And I also know some students that go to college or live in college towns or have recently graduated. And most of them have some form of photo ID and or a driver's license. Very few of them do not. So I think the numbers that some of the Democrats throw out there and some of the people that oppose voter ID are a little inflated. But let's talk about what this is really about. This is about voter integrity. The last two elections have had recounts, in 2008 over the Senate and 2010 over the governorship. It has gotten people wondering about voting fraud in this state. Now, while voting fraud has not been widespread as far as people casting multiple ballots, although there are a handful of cases in the state where that has happened, the biggest issue has been felons voting. I don't know how this photo ID bill will address felons voting, but hundreds of felons have voted illegally in the past two elections here in the state of Minnesota. And if you go back to 2008, there could have been enough felons voting illegally to change the outcome of that election. So I don't have a problem with photo ID. I think it's a common sense clause. I think that's why most people support it. So why would the Democratic Party oppose it? Well, let's really look at what it is. It comes down to who is going to be voting. The Democrats fear that this will attack their voting base more than it will the Republicans, i.e., those people that don't have legitimate identification, illegal immigrants, or those people that have recently moved to the country and might be getting a large number of social services. Also, they're worried about some others too. But that's basically what it comes down to. They're trying to protect their voting bloc. It's not about any of this integrity. It's not about any cost. It's not about anything like that. It's about protecting who they think their most likely voters are. Likewise, let's look at the Republicans, what it is too. Maybe it is about voting integrity, but for them it's about eliminating the unnecessary illegal voters that they think vote against them. And that's what they're going for. In Greater Minnesota, this doesn't seem to be as big of an issue. Most people know who everyone is when they come to a voting place, and if a busload of people shows up with people to vote, somebody's going to ask some questions. However, in larger metropolitan areas with a much more transient population and in college towns, this is much more difficult of a task. We're probably going to be voting on this November. I don't see a problem with presenting my ID and showing who I am when I cast a ballot. The question is, will everyone else also have an issue with it? We'll have to see. It comes to a vote between you and me. But the governor did have an opportunity to pass voter ID legislation last year, and he vetoed it. That's why this constitutional amendment being used by the Republicans is a way just to circumvent the governor. I just hope this doesn't happen too often, and if the shoe's ever on the other foot, the other party doesn't have to see the same sting.